For far too long, gun control has chipped away at a cornerstone of American liberty, smothering law-abiding citizens under a tangle of unnecessary restrictions. The Second Amendment has been systematically hollowed out by those who crave power at the expense of individual rights. Bureaucrats and politicians have turned our once unshakable right into a tightly regulated privilege. But now, for the first time in decades, there's a sliver of hope. With a Republican-led trifecta in the federal government, the stage is set to claw back the rights that have been trampled on for generations. The chance to undo the damage, piece by piece, is finally within reach. In this video, we'll talk about how we can reclaim the full promise of the Second Amendment. Gun control was never about safety. It was about control. The National Firearms Act of 1934 is a prime example. Masked as a way to crack down on gangster weapons, the NFA slapped an outrageous $200 tax on items like short-barreled shotguns and machine guns, essentially pricing the average American out of owning them. Let's not forget, $200 back then was equivalent to nearly $4,000 today. This wasn't crime prevention. It was an economic barrier aimed at disarming ordinary people. Meanwhile, criminals kept doing what they've always done: ignore the law. Things only got worse with the Gun Control Act of 1968. Politicians exploited high-profile assassinations to push through sweeping restrictions, including stricter licensing requirements and import bans. The so-called sporting purposes clause, embedded in this legislation, became a Trojan horse for further overreach. Bureaucrats decided what qualified as sporting, effectively blocking firearms they didn't want the public to have. Did this stop crime? Of course not. It only made it harder for responsible citizens to arm themselves. And then came the Hughes Amendment of 1986, sneaking its way into a bill that was supposed to protect gun owners. This amendment banned the sale of newly manufactured machine guns to civilians, creating an artificial scarcity that jacked up prices and locked out average enthusiasts. It wasn't about safety. It was about putting a price tag on freedom. Fast forward to recent decades, and the meddling has escalated. The Obama administration used executive orders to impose bans on ammunition and tighten regulations. Biden's administration has been even more aggressive, pushing bans on pistol braces, homemade firearms, and forced reset triggers. The ATF has become the government's weapon of choice, redefining laws on the fly without congressional approval. The Second Amendment wasn't written with room for negotiation or bureaucratic tinkering. It's a guarantee, a shield meant to protect personal freedom. But over the years, politicians have hacked away at it, turning what was once a fundamental right into a heavily restricted privilege. No amount of regulation will ever stop criminals from doing what criminals do. The net effect? Look at cities like Chicago, New York, and Los Angeles, places with some of the strictest gun laws in the country. They're also places where violent crime rates are through the roof. In 2022 alone, Chicago recorded 695 homicides, most involving firearms, despite its labyrinth of gun restrictions. Gun control laws don't stop the bad guys. They only stop law-abiding citizens from defending themselves. But politicians keep doubling down on failed policies. A 2021 study in Justice Quarterly found no concrete evidence that stricter gun laws reduce violent crime. Yet gun owners are forced to endure endless paperwork, costly delays, and legal hoops just to exercise their constitutional rights. And when criminals strike, the government's solution is always the same: punish the innocent even more. Want a suppressor to protect your hearing? Be prepared to wait months under the NFA. Want to build a firearm for personal use? Too bad. Biden's ATF has already outlawed it. Meanwhile, criminals laugh at these laws. They buy their weapons on the black market or steal them outright. And every time one of them commits a crime, it's the law-abiding gun owners who pay the price. So how do we fix all these? It starts by re-establishing common sense and making the Constitution the final word once more. The Second Amendment doesn't have fine print or exceptions for convenience. It's a right, not a privilege. Yet over time, the government has warped it into a tangled mess of state-specific restrictions, arbitrary rules, and bureaucratic nonsense. So the first step to restoring sanity is via national constitutional carry. Congressman Thomas Massey's H.R. 9534 could finally end the insanity of patchwork carry laws. Imagine being able to carry legally in all 50 states without worrying about stepping into a bureaucratic minefield because you crossed a state line. Today, a gun owner can go from law-abiding citizen to potential felon simply by driving into the wrong jurisdiction. National constitutional carry would eliminate this madness, ensuring that our rights don't stop at state borders. But the fight doesn't end with where we can carry. It's also about what we can own. Enter the Hearing Protection Act, aka the Shush Act, which aims to deregulate suppressors. Despite Hollywood's lies, suppressors don't make guns silent. They make them safer by protecting hearing. Countries like New Zealand encourage suppressor use for this reason, yet in America, they're regulated like explosives under the NFA. This absurdity needs to stop. And then there's Biden's ATF, which has been on a rampage, criminalizing homemade firearms, pistol braces, and forced reset triggers through overreaching rules. Thankfully, the Supreme Court's Brewin Decision has drawn a line in the sand, declaring that gun laws must align with the Second Amendment's text, history, and tradition. Biden's bans fail that test miserably, and it's time to strike them down. But laws alone won't fix this mess. To truly protect the Second Amendment, we need to confront the biggest enforcer of unconstitutional overreach, the ATF. This evil agency is the poster child for government overreach. What started as a simple tax-collecting agency has mutated into a bloated bureaucratic monster with one mission: crush the rights of law-abiding gun owners. The agency's track record isn't just riddled with overreach, it has defined it. The ATF has become the enforcement arm for anti-gun activists, creating rules out of thin air and turning millions of citizens into criminals overnight. Originally part of the Department of the Treasury, the ATF was tasked with collecting taxes on alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. Guns weren't even the focus. But over the decades, the agency expanded its mission far beyond its original purpose. Now, it operates as a rogue entity, building illegal gun registries and banning firearm components with zero congressional oversight. The Operation Fast and Furious scandal, where they lost track of firearms that ended up in the hands of Mexican cartels, is a perfect example of their incompetence and corruption. So what does abolishing the ATF look like? For starters, it means cutting its budget to the bone. Tax collection can go back to the IRS. Crime enforcement can be handled by the FBI. The ATF serves no purpose other than undermining constitutional rights. Its billions in funding could be better spent elsewhere, or not spent at all. Of course, anti-gunners will scream that the ATF is essential for public safety. Yeah, essential my butt. For the life of me, I can't think of a single thing the ATF actually accomplished that another agency couldn't. Their so-called rulemaking has done nothing but confuse the public and destroy trust in the system. Even within the ATF, employees have exposed chaos and mismanagement. The ATF is beyond reform. It's time to dismantle it and put an end to its war on the Second Amendment. But the ATF is only one piece of the puzzle. There's another fight we can't ignore: red flag laws. These are the anti-gunner's ultimate weapon. Their so-called safety measures are nothing more than a fast track to stripping away our rights without due process. With a single complaint, be it from a bitter ex or a nosy neighbor, your legally owned firearms can be seized without you even knowing who or what hit you. No trial, no defense, just a judge rubber stamping an order based on one-sided claims. That's not justice. That is textbook tyranny. These laws aren't just unconstitutional. They're dangerous. They create an environment where gun owners are afraid to seek help for mental health issues, fearing it could trigger a red flag order. And who's paying for this blatant rights violation? We are. Thanks to the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, taxpayer dollars are funneled into states that adopt these draconian measures. So not only are we losing our rights, our wallets are also funding the operation. And let's talk about the next prohibited persons list, a government blacklist that strips Americans of their Second Amendment rights without their knowledge. Veterans, for example, have been disproportionately targeted. Many find themselves on the list simply for having someone else manage their finances or seeking treatment for PTSD. These aren't criminals. They're people who put their lives on the line for this country, now being punished for needing help. Once you're on that list, good luck getting yourself off that list. The appeals process is a bureaucratic nightmare designed to keep you in limbo, and all it takes is one arbitrary decision by a faceless bureaucrat to strip you of your rights. Meanwhile, criminals who couldn't care less about these laws operate with impunity, buying their weapons illegally or stealing them outright. These overreaches don't make us safer. They leave us vulnerable. Red flag laws and the NICS list target the wrong people while leaving actual threats untouched. To fix this, we need to tackle the root cause: the draconian gun control laws of the 20th century that laid the foundation for this mess. The 20th century was a turning point for the Second Amendment, and not in a good way. It marked the beginning of a relentless assault on gun rights, with lawmakers pushing through legislation that prioritized control over liberty. The NFA was one of the first major blows. Then things got a lot worse with the GCA. Then there was the Hughes Amendment. The sporting purposes clause buried in the GCA might be the most insulting piece of all. The Second Amendment has nothing to do with hunting or sport. It's about self-defense and protecting liberty. Yet this clause has been exploited for decades to block the importation of firearms under the guise of them being non-sporting. These laws aren't relics. They're chains that still bind gun owners today. If we want to restore the Second Amendment, the NFA, GCA, Hughes Amendment, and sporting purposes clause all have to go. But legislation isn't the only way the government is restricting rights. They've found another weapon: taxation. Taxing a constitutional right is tyranny disguised as policy. And that's exactly what the Pittman-Robertson Act does with its 11% excise tax on firearms, ammunition, and archery equipment. Politicians claim it's for wildlife conservation, but they'd only cut through the BS. It's a blatant infringement on the Second Amendment. No other right in the Bill of Rights is taxed. We don't pay to speak freely or to practice our religion. Why are we forced to pay a premium to exercise our constitutional freedoms? This tax has disproportionately hurt low-income Americans, turning gun ownership into a luxury rather than a right. Think about it. If you're already scraping by, that 11% markup could be the difference between being able to protect your family or being left defenseless. It's a financial barrier designed to chip away at gun ownership under the guise of public benefit. Worse yet, it sets a dangerous precedent. If the government can tax the Second Amendment, what's stopping them from slapping a fee on other rights? Granted, the Pittman-Robertson Act might have started as a conservation effort, but it has since become a tool for systemic overreach. It's high time this modern poll tax is repealed. Sadly, the fight to reclaim the Second Amendment isn't for the faint of heart. Gun control advocates have entrenched themselves in every corner of government, armed with the same tired arguments and endless resources. They claim that fewer guns mean less crime, or that restrictions somehow make people safer. These aren't just bad takes, they're outright lies. Study after study shows that areas with stricter gun laws are often the most dangerous. Gun-free zones don't deter violence, they invite it. But facts don't matter to the anti-gun establishment. What does matter is grassroots pressure and public awareness. The key to overcoming political resistance lies in making noise, relentless, undeniable noise. Lawmakers need to know that their jobs are on the line if they ignore the will of the people. History proves that when gun owners mobilize, they can move mountains. Constitutional carry laws and other pro-2. Victories didn't happen in a vacuum. They were driven by individuals who refused to stay silent. And then there's the legal battlefield. Every attempt to roll back gun control is met with a barrage of lawsuits. But thanks to the Supreme Court's Brewin Decision, we now have a powerful tool in our arsenal. This ruling made it clear. Gun laws must align with the text, history, and tradition of the Constitution. It's a precedent that gives us the upper hand, but it's useless without action. The roadblocks are enormous, but they're not insurmountable. The only way to win this fight is by staying loud, staying organized, and refusing to back down. Every call to Congress, every petition, and every public show of support adds up. The anti-gun lobby is counting on apathy. We should prove them wrong. This isn't just a battle for gun rights. It's a battle for liberty itself. It's time for every gun owner in America to step up and take action. The time for sitting back and hoping someone else will fight for your rights is over. Gun control didn't get this far because anti-2A activists worked harder. It got this far because too many of us stayed quiet for too long. If we want to undo decades of damage, we need to step up and fight back like our freedoms depend on it, because they do. This fight starts with individual responsibility. Signing petitions, contacting your representatives, and joining grassroots movements aren't just small gestures. They're the backbone of change. Look at programs like the Make America Armed Again initiative. These efforts give Congress a clear message. We demand action. Tens of thousands of signatures and calls make it impossible for politicians to ignore the will of the people. But we can't stop there. We can get involved locally. Gun rights groups are the boots on the ground, organizing rallies, fighting legislation, and educating the public. If you're not part of the movement, you're leaving the heavy lifting to someone else. Apathy is the enemy of freedom. Every voice counts, and yours could be the one that tips the scales. And let's not forget Congress. These politicians work for us. Flood their inboxes, jam their phone lines, and show up at their offices. Demand that they repeal unconstitutional laws, defund rogue agencies like the ATF, and protect our rights at all costs. If they don't, vote them out. Finally, share this video with your friends to spread awareness. The more pro-2A people know about this movement, the more powerful it becomes. If there was value in this video for you, consider leaving a like, subscribing to the channel, and hitting that bell icon for more of these videos. Thanks for watching, and God bless America.